أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to another installment of our talk show program. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله النكاح سنتي فمن لم يعمل بسنتي فليس مني. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi said, marriage is from my sunnah, and from whomever does not act upon my sunnah is not from me. But whom should one marry, and what characteristics should we look for in a spouse? And how do we avoid the obstacles along the way of trying to get married? With us to answer this and more, inshallah, is Sheikh Muhammed Mehdi. Sheikh, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Pleasure to have you back on the program. Have you
Well, likewise, I haven't been with you for a while.
I think you're the record appearance holder on the program so far.
Am I?
Yes, you are. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Sheikh, marriage, I'm sure that's probably one of the things you get the most calls about.
Yeah, it's that and the monthly cycle. That's pretty much the most phone calls you get about.
Ahsant. Sheikh, we'll get right into it. We'll get into the first question. It's very open, very basic. What should a man look for in a woman generally, and what should a woman look for in a man?
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بفضل الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. This is one of the questions that is very commonly asked, but seldom is it followed. People actually don't follow these guidelines at all when it comes to getting. But when I say at all, I use it with the, I use it firmly. I don't use it where I'm using it loosely. That people don't follow it. Like they'll tell you, I want to marry by the guidelines of Islam, then they marry the person with the most likes on Instagram or the biggest influencer they can find. Now, for a male, or finding a male, or accepting in the sense where I want to accept a male to marry. If I'm a girl, I want a male that has certain qualities that I like. Now these, we have what are the primary qualities, and then we have the secondary qualities, and then we have tertiary qualities. The primary qualities are what Islam says. The secondary qualities are what you want, and the tertiary qualities are what you prefer. So if we go with the primary, the first thing I need to look for is deen and akhlaq. Deen basically is someone that fears God. When you say someone has deen, means they pray, they fast, they pray in their daily prayers, they fast Shahr Ramadan, they will go to Hajj, they don't work a job that has any haram in it. But basics, we're not talking about someone that prays Salat al-Layl. Akhlaq, when we look at akhlaq, it must be someone like the hadith of Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, or Amir al-Mu'mineen says, one of them, sallallahu alayhi, he says, be with people that if, when you're alive, they yearn to be with you. And when you die, they mourn you. Why? Because they miss you. You're that pleasant to be around. Not like the antagonist when you turn up. I remember one woman, she said to me that about her spouse, she said that when my spouse used to come home before she got divorced, she actually got divorced, she said when he used to put the key in the door and turn it, she said my stomach would turn. Like imagine you were living with someone like when he came home, you would die because you don't know what he's going to do next. Some guys that come home, they're like drunkards without any alcohol, you know. So akhlaq, a good temperament, and that is the second thing. This is the first two qualities for a woman seeking man. After that, they're what you want. You know, if I want certain things that I prefer, like even aesthetics, not to a point where I want them to be a certain look, but enough for me to be attracted to them, even slightly, because that gets built upon. These aren't so, but I would tend to go with the first ones because this is a guideline for you not to reject. However, it's not an obligation. Otherwise, it would become haram. Okay. Otherwise, the Maraja would have said it's haram for you to reject them. It's a strong recommendation, very strong. And then the things you like, then things you prefer, which are loose. I prefer for them to have this, but if they don't, I prefer for them to have, for example, I prefer them to have a steady job, but it's not necessary. For example, that could be a tertiary thing. Now, looking for a woman, you're told to look for a righteous woman. You're told to look for a woman that fears God, and that's the main thing that you should be looking for. But it doesn't mean when I say sometimes someone tells me I married this person because he's religious or she's religious, mate. When you look, what's your idea of religion? What's your idea of religion? Her hijab is an indication of her religion. The way she dresses is an indication of her religion. I'm not talking about one brother, he wanted a woman that wears a shador. I told him, you get your wife to wear a shador. You're not going to find a woman with a shador unless she's married. It's really rare to find unless you're living in the Middle East. So we're saying religion is her dress code's appropriate. She's not doing duck face on the internet for every guy to give her likes. That's not religion. I know it might offend some people, but I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to say what the situation is like. So that's what you look for.
With the primary factors, apart from things like hijab, how can you sort of tell? How do you sort of know that this person is religious apart from what they say?
Well, this is where you have to do your own investigation. I have to ask people, who knows these people so well? For example, I see a sister I want to marry. I look at her and I say, or I look at the family, they're a good family, I want to marry. I ask people that know them, what do you think? Why? Because they might be a good family, but that might be a lost sheep that they have as a daughter. That happens. So I need to ask what's she like, what's her situation like. And likewise, when a girl is looking for a guy, I need to ask, who is this guy? You might meet a guy that looks so righteous and could have the darkest lifestyle that you don't know about, So do you ask people to investigate, to look around the people that know them? And they don't have to give you all the details. They can just tell you, look, this person isn't reliable. Or this person, for example, drinks alcohol. And they're the ones that tell you there's no riba here. Yeah. Because it's necessary for them to let you know. But they shouldn't be telling you things that aren't necessary for you to know.
Ahsan, Sheikh. So, Sheikh, you mentioned the primary factors, religion and akhlaq, and that's what someone should look for. We are now just passing the istishhad of Rasulullah, the istishhad of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. We have examples of the Quran, of the wives of Nabi Lut, of Nabi Nuh as well, and examples of bad spouses. So if we have the Anbiya have struggled to select a spouse, or not struggled, but have selected a spouse that is considered a poor spouse, what chance do we have? What hope do we have?
Well, firstly, with the question, to say that they selected them is questionable. And people might say, hold on, there's a hadith says, the Prophet says, إِيَّاكُمْ وَخَضْرَاءَ الدِّمَنِ, beware of the flower in the swamp. And they asked the Prophet, what is this flower in the swamp? He says, الْمَرْأَةُ الْحَسْنَاء فِي مَنْبَتِ سُوءٍ, that a woman that is pretty or attractive that comes from a bad house or a bad environment. So you're warned about marrying a woman from a very bad environment. It doesn't say don't do it. It says it's a warning. Remember, I need to make sure she's good. Yeah. It's not saying otherwise, put it this way, no one will get married. We're saying be more cautious. Like there's more likelihood that there's something wrong with what you're about to marry. So the question comes in is how these prophets married these women. And even the Imams, Imam Al-Jawad alayhi salam and Imam Hassan Mushtaba. If you look at the ones that we know about that were bad, if you look at the process in which they got married, they never actually asked for their hands. In the case of Imam Al-Jawad, Al-Fadl was pushed upon him. Yes. Ma'mun said, you're marrying my daughter. And Imam Al-Jawad was 9 years old. He wasn't. And he said to him, you're marrying my daughter. That's it. It's a done deal. And Imam Al-Jawad accepted. Otherwise the marriage would be void. Correct. He accepted, but he had to in the situation he was in as well. Imam Hassan al-Mushtaba's situation is a bit different. In Imam Hassan al-Mushtaba's situation, Al-Ash'ath ibn Qais al-Kindi, he was the Sheikh of the Ashira, the head of Ashirat Kinda. And he had a lot of influence. And a lot of the Ashirat Kinda had been killed by Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam in the Battle of Jamal. And there was animosity towards him. So there's a lot of different opinions on this, but when he offered, and I don't want to go into the full detail of the opinions, but when he offered his daughter to Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, he said, my daughter for your son, Imam Hassan. If Amir al-Mu'mineen had rejected this, it's like I'm stretching a hand of friendship, especially to keep the peace with the Muslims there, it would have not looked that good. And that's in that case.
In a way, it was a political move.
They say this, and I'm going to get to the end, I'll explain. So he's put it there, Imam. If you notice, in both cases now, they've been pushed on them. In the case of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, same thing. If you look at the hadith, for example, with Hafsa, Umar ibn al-Khattab offers her to Abu Bakr rejects her. He offers her to Uthman rejects her. So then he offers her to the Prophet. Obviously, Ahlul Sunnah say that, and this is incorrect, absolutely incorrect. They say they rejected her because they knew the Prophet desired her. So always they put things down on the Prophet. But that's not the case. Omar pushed her onto the Prophet, and Abu Bakr pushed Aisha onto the Prophet. Aisha was divorced. She was not a 6-year-old girl as she claims to be. She was somewhere in close to her 20s, even more than her 20s. And obviously, if you look, the only one that pushes for her being so young is her. The only one that pushes for her never being touched is her. She was not the only woman that the Prophet ever married that wasn't married before was Sayyidah Khadija alayhi salam. All the rest were married. I'm not saying that there's going to be a difference here, and we'll discuss that further maybe later. But the case here is that she was pushed onto the Prophet as well. Some people come up with the opinion that the Prophet wanted to make peace with Banu Taym, which is the tribe of Abu Bakr, and Banu Adi, the tribe of Umar. But Banu Taym and Banu Adi were like, when America's attacking Afghanistan and Australia joins the war, they were like Australia, they were pointless being there. They're not really a force, They weren't like Banu Umayyah, a stronger force. They were nothing to even consider. And the same thing with Nabi Musa alayhi salam's wife, Sufayra. She's the one, even in the Quran, she says to her father, even though her father's a prophet, but she was a bad woman, in the sense she fought against the wasi of Musa, Yusha bin Nun. But she is the one that asked. So you look at all these cases, the common factor is they're the ones that moved. I'm not saying if a woman asks, it's a bad thing. Don't get me wrong. But I'm just saying that it wasn't the prophets or the imams that went in this direction. They came to them, they didn't reject. Because on the Dhahir, they married. You know what I mean? So in this case, they married them, and that was done. Halla, the question is, was it political or not? The answer is simple. If you or I married someone that was bad, from a bad family, people are going to say, what the hell are you doing? What you're doing is wrong. What do you think you're doing? And they're entitled to say this. However, the prophets and the imams have knowledge of what we don't know. And they are, as God says, when Nabi Yusuf takes Benjamin by putting the goblet in his saddlebag, and God says he would not have arrested him by the rule of the king or the law of the king had Allah not willed it. Allah had not commanded for it to be done. So these prophets look at what Allah wills, what Allah wants. Allah wills for this, so they do it. Otherwise, you could go to the point, why did Imam Hussein alayhi salam take the women and children to Karbala? Now he's going to be slaughtered. Well, it's illogical if you do not know the hidden agenda. Now you say to yourself, why do people question then? But Nabi Musa himself, when Allah brought Khidr to teach him, he took that factor from him. He didn't allow him to know So every time Khidr did something, what did Musa do?
He asked.
He questioned him.
Yeah.
So he said to him, I told you you are not enduring or forbearing enough to accept this. And that's why we have this tendency to say, why? But we got to look at that point of this alam of the unseen or the unknown.
Ahsan, Sheikh. Now, in all the factors or characteristics that you mentioned in the first answer, you didn't mention love. And I put love in inverted commas here. So do you need to love the potential spouse that you're going after before you marry them?
Look, there are love stories where two people, childhood, they fancy each other, or because that's pretty much what it is. You fancy somebody, and you see someone, you fancy them. Pretty much, it's the first person that's given you any wish, as we say, anyone's given you any face, and you fancy them. To say that you actually love them is pretty rich. You can say with the Westerners, and because they go into non-marital relationships, they have 3 kids and they decide to get married. Yeah. They are in love because they've developed a relationship long enough. But I don't know how you can be in love with someone you haven't spoken to from your heart, because it's haram.
Correct.
You haven't been able to touch or be affectionate with your heart. Why? Because you haven't had that feeling. Yes, you desire them, but that love is not the actual love. You know, people say, do you believe in love at first sight? No. Real love comes in a relationship. Real love is sacrificing yourself for somebody else. This is what real love is. Real love is actually vying one another to see who can be more compassionate and giving to the other. That's love. So if you say, are we falling in love and getting married? I really don't know if you could call that love. Yeah, it might be love. I don't know if that's what they call it. But, you know, in that case, because men fall in love every 5 seconds. You know, honestly, men see, oh, she's attractive, he's in love, she's attractive, he's in love. Women say, oh, this is my heartthrob. You know what I mean? But that's not what it is. So is love a factor? You can't love someone you haven't lived with. It's impossible. It's impossible. How do you know what they're like? How do you know what it's like when we hang out with each other? We put on a game face. You go to work, you put on a game face. They don't go home with you, the people that you see at work.
Hassan Sheikh, but these days more and more youth are getting to know each other in more, I guess, non-halal ways. You know, there's people have issues, for example, with someone asking a parent to get to know their daughter.
Yeah.
I've heard a story of a brother who asked the parent, and the parent told him go message her on Facebook because she doesn't want someone to come to the door. So we have examples like that, and then they develop this love.
Yeah.
Isn't this something that we should be condemning and not encouraging?
Well, if the parent gives them permission to go talk to them, then I think if you can verify that, I think that the parents told him go talk to her.
Yeah.
You should ask the parent if you can do a temporary marriage with her, bil halal, because he's allowing you to go talk to her. There'd be no issue with that. Yeah. If the parents go and talk to my daughter, there shouldn't be an issue with you asking for the parents, can we do a non-contact muta marriage so we can actually talk, so it can be halal? There shouldn't be an issue in that case. You know, there's look, Islam is not against the modern ways. It's against what's haram. It's against what Allah forbids. There's different ways when people meet each other. They can have a chat as long as the parents allow this, and they do a temporary marriage that's halal. That's with the permission of the father, of course, because the father's the ones obviously told them to go contact her on Facebook.
Ahsan, Sheikh, what about, you mentioned the parents here. So how much say do the parents have in terms of, or how much influence are the parents allowed to have in the selection of the spouse for the child, and what's their role?
Well, this is relative to the parent. If the parent is someone that fears God and that they have judgment and looks in the best interest of the child, they've got all the say. I would give them 90%. As a child, I'd give my parent 90 to 100% of the say. If I know my parents are looking in my best interest, you know. But if my parent is someone that is looking for a family or a financial investment, you know, like some people are taking their child to marriage like they're taking a cow to the marketplace. If you know your parents are taking you as a cow to the marketplace, to sell you, no, I wouldn't take their advice on marriage. Definitely not. I'd actually ask Hakim Ashara, a Sheikh or someone to advise me if my parent is not interested in my well-being. On the contrary, like sometimes a parent says, all right, I want to marry my child to their cousin, and their cousin doesn't even know which direction the Qibla is in, but he's the cousin. Or I want to marry her to someone that's got money, because, you know, money always makes things happen. You know, I once said as a joke to someone, he said to me, he was 40 years old, he told me, I want to marry a 19-year-old girl. That's what I'm looking for. And I said, how many zeros do you have at the end of your bank account? He said, why is that important? I go, that's what's important to the people. Because you take a look at how often do you see someone, 60s, 70s, he's with a 20-year-old supermodel. How? Go look at his bank account. I'm talking about that's how society is. You might think it's not. Take a look at the mahars they put these days. Money, and then they tell you, I love this, when someone says to me, principle of the matter, my brain can explode. If it's principle of the matter, then why are you putting money in there? It's not principle, it's money. Just say it's money. Admit to it, you know. It's okay, you'll feel better. So this is what I'm saying. So parents are going to have a say, and they're looking at you as a financial investment. I wouldn't really take their say with much weight.
What about in terms of there's people that have problems with marrying into other nationalities, or even the same nationality but different villages? Their parents won't allow them to marry.
Well, look, there's no issue with marrying interracially.
Yep.
As long as the person's religious. Doesn't matter what he is or what she is, as long as they're religious. But, you know, the pendulum swings both ways. You can't say, for example, I want to marry from another race, but I won't allow my sister to marry from another race. And a lot of people do that. The pendulum swings both ways. If you put it back on yourself. Would you accept it? Then accept it. If you wouldn't accept it, then don't sit there and tell people that they have to accept it. But the main thing is religion. The other thing is, when I say religion, you have to know who you're marrying. Like if you come and ask me, someone says to me, there's John, he wants to get married. Do you know John? I say, listen, I've known the guy for 6 months, seems like a good guy. That for you, it doesn't mean I'm vouching for him.
Yeah.
What it means is I've known him for 6 months. In 6 months, he seems good. You need to delve further in. You need to find out who he is. If I have, what's it called? A red flag.
Yep.
I've got to be careful. When there's red flags, someone you don't know, and I've got a rule, and I keep for myself. I won't marry my daughter to anyone that I have to put conditions on. If I look at a person, I need to put conditions on him, I won't marry. Why would I bother? Because if I put conditions on him, that means I intend on divorcing my daughter at one point. I don't want that. I want him to get married, don't come back. Be happy, just like, we got married. You know, be happy. You got a problem, solve it yourself. You know, bicker between each other and fix it yourself. You don't need other people to do it for you.
Ahsan, Sheikh. Sheikh, next I wanted to focus on, I guess, a certain segment of the spouse, the community, I guess. And this seems to be this frame of mind that the community sometimes have towards, those that were married and then their marriage failed and then they, got divorced. So where it's a case where if they've been married before, a lot of people won't even give them the opportunity or won't even speak to them or won't look for them for permanent marriage, right? So what do we do about this mentality in terms of the community? Is it something that we can even justify at all?
Well, once again, with everything, it's case-by-case basis. Firstly, someone's divorced. Why did they get divorced? If I talk to somebody, say a sister, and I say to her, why did you divorce? She says, I wasn't happy. What were you happy with? Just wasn't happy. So why did you marry him to begin with? And if I see that this is someone that's whimsical, that suddenly can just say, I'm not happy, I want out, there's no way I'm going to marry this person. Because one day I could have a kid with this person and then they say, listen, you just don't do it for me anymore. I want to move elsewhere. So, but I've already got the signs. Or a guy, find out, that's one thing I always do. Someone's divorced, look for their ex. They're obviously going to tell you, my ex is going to say bad things about me. So what? I need to know why they left. I need to know, like you hear a story, oh, his wife left the house and took the kids. How mean is she? Hold on. Let's see why she left the house and took the kids. Why would she do such a thing? So I need to ascertain whether she's crazy or whether he's crazy and she ran off with the kids. I can't just take, because they seem like a good person I'm talking to. One of the brothers wanted to get married. He was divorced. And I said to him, he wanted me to vouch for him. I was dealing with him. And then I said, do you have any referees? One of his referees was his ex-wife. That's a good sign.
Yeah.
And she tells you that I asked for a divorce because there was my personal reasons. But he was a good man, rah, rah, rah. You know,
Yeah.
See, that's a good thing. So if I've investigated and his ex-wife's vouching for him, when a divorce gets ugly, why did the divorce get ugly? Why did you allow it to get ugly? Recently, I had a gentleman last night. He divorced his wife. And when I spoke to her afterwards, she said he was a gentleman. And she said, we were just not meant to be. We ended it, but she said, well, he dealt with me like a gentleman. Surprising, but they got divorced. The man wanted the divorce, and that was it. And she was happy with the divorce. It's not like she wanted to salvage the marriage, but there must have been other reasons. However, she called a spade a spade. And if that's the reason why I don't want a divorcee, then I'm right. But if I don't want a divorcee because she's divorced, then that's silly. Because out of the prophets I mentioned, the prophet married 17 wives altogether in his lifetime. Out of the 17, only one was not married. 16 had been divorced. So this is telling you a lot about the way the prophet was. Take a look at Asma bint Umais. She was the wife of Ja'far al-Tayyar. Imagine the holiness of that. She was married to Ja'far. Ja'far was martyred in Mu'tah. Then she went from holiness and she ended up marrying who? Abu Bakr. From Abu Bakr, she got Muhammed ibn Abi Bakr. That purity. Imagine from her womb came this purity. When Abu Bakr died, she married who? Amir al-Mu'minin Ali ibn Abi Talib sallallahu alayhi. So Amir al-Mu'minin still married her. It's not like, all right, she was divorced that many times. I shouldn't have that. But if I'm going to go marry a woman that's wanton, I don't want her. And when I say wanton, she's after dunya. If she's man hopping, she says, I want to marry this guy, after a year, 6 months, I'll get divorced from this guy. I'm not really interested in him. You don't want that. Because when you go to get married, you should be thinking about till death do us part. You should be thinking it's for life. Otherwise, if you don't want it for life, then go to a temporary marriage. Don't be married permanently.
So once you've done all the hard work, you've done your research, you've found someone that you wanted to marry, then comes the period, I guess I want to call it the negotiation period, where the families start to discuss the financial aspect of the new relationship. Things such as the dowry, wedding expenses, how they're going to live, where they're going to go on honeymoon. This sometimes is discussed between families, sometimes it's discussed between the future spouses themselves. All right, so what's your advice for people and what their approach to take in this period from the groom's perspective and the bride's perspective?
Don't overcommit. A lot of people overcommit. We do stupid things because I want to get married. I say, mithl ma baddik, whatever you want, I'll do. Don't overcommit. Because you overcommit, you overstretch yourself, then you'll look like a liar when you want to back out. So don't put yourself in a situation. Just say whatever Allah permits, we will do. As for all these, I'm not a big fan of all this negotiation. I'm a big fan of the guy comes and asks for the girl's hand. You're happy with him. She's happy with him. Let's get this done. And whatever he does, he does. Whatever she does, whatever they agree upon afterwards. They don't necessarily need to go on a holiday as soon as they're married. Honeymoon. They can go on a holiday later on. They can go on, because when you're going on a honeymoon, you're familiarizing yourself in a different environment. I'd rather you familiarize yourself at home and then go on a holiday after you know each other.
Yeah, you're more comfortable.
But you're more comfortable. You're more in your zone. You know what you each like. You know what to pack. You know what to take with you.
Logically, it makes more sense.
Yeah, it makes more sense. But the thing is, the problem is a lot of people learn this afterwards, after they get married. So before you get married, don't overcommit. Don't put yourself in a situation you can't. You say, no, I can't do this or I can do that. And if the other party doesn't agree, you pull the plug from there. But the problem here is you need parents that are wise enough to advise you this. The problem is most parents, they don't know how to advise their kids when it comes to marriage. They don't know. They'll tell your kid, yeah, whatever you want, you do that. That's wrong. I don't know, because I know when I was a child, I knew nothing. That's why I rely on you as a parent to advise me. I'm not understanding on what decision I should make. The parent can understand that this is important for you to make the right decision there and then. Remember, this negotiation process should not be made difficult on the man. If you're happy with the man, you should be happy with what the man is delivering. At the same token, the man might not have, or the woman might not have someone that's guiding them, then the in-laws have to guide the person, because the other ones have failed in that department. Not because they're incompetent there. They're not able to do that. So sometimes you'll have, for example, it's like a father that plays the mother and the father role.
Yep.
Sometimes you have a father-in-law that needs to play on behalf of the groom or the spouse's father. They got to do the double role, the dual role. However, that's why. However, you should, when it comes to this negotiation phase, anything you're not happy with, you should seek advice on it before you actually commit into this. But if I can handle something, I'll just take it. Because you're not going to always get a family that says, ahla wa sahla, take it and see you later. You're not going to get that. Every family is different. But if it's the right person, I'd yield somewhat. I wouldn't be too far.
What about in terms of the material demands? Because we've gotten into this habit of sort of copying the Western culture in a lot of the ways we perform our marriages, even the honeymoon thing. It's probably something that we've adapted from the West, right? And then isn't it bad for us to continuously set this example and continuously follow these routines?
Well, you're talking about the modern society today. Like, I don't celebrate birthdays, for example. People think I'm a caveman because I don't do that. I've none of my kids. My daughter's 16, and I've never celebrated a birthday for my kids. And people go, why don't you do it? I hate having to celebrate one day for my child. I don't celebrate Mother's Day. For me, every day is Mother's Day. Every day is my child's birthday. Every day I see my child in the morning, they're special to me. I don't need to wait for one day to make them special. I come home, I don't need to buy them a gift on a certain day. When I come home, I see something in the shop I like, I buy it for them. I don't say I'm going to save this for their birthday. I don't believe in this. The only things from the West that I probably would have celebrated, I don't know. I don't know. I really don't follow anything I can't, unless you can remind me. As for marriage and going on a honeymoon, I'm a person that likes to holiday anyway. Yeah. I like to go.
But in terms of the way we conduct our ceremonies, for example,
the ceremonies
will
we use culture. The culture is used, and if someone living in Australia is a hybrid Arab Australian culture, it's not a Lebanese culture.
Yeah,
it's hybrid. I'm not too fond of culture and tradition. Some people are. Yep. For me, I like to make things. I like things to be easy. I like to simplify things for people, because God's made everything easy for me. I ask for something, He gives it to me. So why should I make things more difficult to people? So that's the way I like to deal with people, the way God's dealt with me. God's dealt so easy with me, let me deal like that with people. Yep. Why should I make it difficult? If I don't want someone to marry my daughter, from the start I'll say, arrivederci. Yeah. Thanks, but no thanks. Definitely. I won't sit there and waste a person's time and tell them, listen, can you go get me 3 pints of milk from a wandering albatross? That just doesn't work, It doesn't work for me. You shouldn't make it a massive negotiating phase. Like I said, you're not there to trade cattle. You're not there to self. It's not the Royal Easter Show in the original days where they used to actually bring animals, and it's not one of these markets. It isn't.
Sheikh. Sheikh, and final question I wanted to ask is, having dealt with your fair share of counselling and matchmaking and whatnot, what's your advice to those who are seeking to get married? And I want to particularly stress about those that have tried and perhaps tried it some more and still aren't married.
Okay. I'll give it to you in 7 steps.
Yeah.
Number 1, turn to Allah. That's the first step. For anything, I want to buy a car. I want to get a job. First thing I do is I wake up in the morning, I pray Salat Subh, and I genuinely turn to God. I pray, God, please God, give me this. I do amal. I could either do ziyarat ashura, dua al-qama, which works every time. I don't mean do it once. I mean, you got to do it passionately. You got to do it every day. And you do it without fail. I want this done. This is essential. I do this. Or istighatha bil Imam al-Hushi. These are all, you'll find them online. All these are available. Or I do dua yastashir. I do something like that. And I do it every day. Once I've done this, then I rely on God. That's the second step. I rely on God. I rely on Allah Azza wa Jal to make way for me. The third thing is I must be content with Allah's decision. So Allah might delay it for me. وَلَعَلَّ الَّذِي أَبْطَأَ عَنِّي هُوَ خَيْرٌ لِي لِعِلْمِكَ بِعَاقِبَةِ الْأُمُورِ. Sometimes I might get what I want immediately. Sometimes it's going to be delayed. Just be content with Allah's decision. And don't stop praying. Don't feel this moment where you go, hold on, it's not happening. No, it's going to happen. But you really got to pray with fervor. You got to pray like a zealot. I really want this. Then another thing is, before you get married, I want you to research what it's like to be a husband or a wife and what a household is like. I don't want you to come with a misconceived perception of what marriage is. See, some people think they come into a marriage and it's like, honey, I'm home. Oh, this is lovely. It's not like that. You know, I don't know. You might have been watching shows. That's not how marriages work. That's not how work works. That's not how, you ever watch in television shows when they show about schools? And the kids are all like, if your child's at school watching Peppa Pig. Sorry, at home, watching Peppa Pig. And he sees Peppa has a little fight with one of the other animals, and then they're friends afterwards. And everyone has a little giggle, and they swim in the mud, or they play in mud, and everyone's happily ever after. That's what happens at school. You could be bullied for days at school. You get beaten up at school. You could get racial discrimination from the teachers. You know, you're gonna watch these shows. They don't depict this. So you're not gonna get the real idea. Marital life isn't what you have depicted it. You can't say, isn't it like, sometimes you'll have a woman say, isn't it true, Sheikh, that I don't have to cook or clean? You know, isn't that true? And I said, well, isn't it true that he doesn't have to dress you in Hermes and Burberry and Versace, and he can go give you clothes from St. Vinny's?
Yeah.
You know, no, not even. No, I'll go get you from the Bailey, as they say, and dress you. Isn't it true? When you want to sit there and say, talk about hukuk, your marriage is already destroyed. Don't sit there and talk about rights. It's about compromise. So the fourth thing is I should do research on how our household should be done. The fifth thing, I should lower my expectations for everything. Lower my expectations, so whatever I get, always keep your expectations from God high, but from everybody else low. So anything that happens to you is what? A bonus. You know, I say I expect to come home and to be totally ignored. So I get home and my wife gives me a glass of water and I say, wow, that's awesome. She gave me a glass of water. Wow, she cooked for me. That's awesome. Other than, oh, why did you make lamb shanks? I don't eat that. Yeah, that's how people are. She's cooked for you. Or I remember one guy, he said he bought his wife, I think it was $150,000, $160,000 four-wheel drive. She goes, I don't like white. I'm serious, it's not a joke. So he traded it in for another colour and lost money.
That's his fault.
Yeah, he should have been traded in for another husband. You know, but that's another thing. Lower your expectations. The last two things, 6 and 7, is do not ignore red flags. When you're going to get married, do not ignore red flags. When you see red flags, see what they're about. Because this might be something that you don't want in marriage. If it's not a big issue, move ahead. But if it is, you see a red flag, look into it. Why? When I say red flag, for people that don't know, when I see things that aren't warning signs, have a check on what they are. For example, I'll give you an example. One guy, I remember, one sister was going to get married. This is in Lebanon, not here. She said the guy came to her house. He was asking to talk to her. Parents sat down with him. She said, he was well dressed, he had a nice car. She said the next day he came without his car. So we asked him, "You can't repairs?" He said, "No, petrol prices went up, so I came in a service," which is like not really a taxi, it's even cheaper,
Yeah.
So that's a red flag. If this guy in the courting process is stingy, what's he going to be like when you get married? He's going to be very stingy. So that's a red flag. Can you live with someone that's like tight-fisted and won't give a cent? And it's very difficult. The final thing is when you are seeking to get married, when you get rejected, ask why you got rejected and accept what they tell you. See, a lot of people tell me, "Can you find out why I got rejected?" And I won't tell them. Because the second I do, they say, "That's not true." I said, "Don't shoot the messenger." Yeah. I'm telling you, like a sister will say, why didn't he want to proceed? And I'll tell her, "Listen, well, he sat with you and he didn't find you as intellectual as he wanted to someone sit with." No, then she'll say, "Oh, I've got a degree. I've got this. He's not even smart." Why are you fighting me? You asked me to find out. Yeah. I gave you the answer. This is the thing. So when you go ask, if I come up and say, "Look, Hajj Mehdi, this sister rejected me. Can you find out why she rejected me?" You come up and say, "Listen, she said that you dress real bad. She said, you're not appealing to walk with in the street." And I'll say, "Hold on. My clothing I got the finest." You say, "Hold on. I'm not telling you this. You told me to ask. So if I ask you, I should be prepared for the answer." It could be the most preposterous response, but I should look into myself, say, maybe this is there. And ask people, because if I ask around and want the answer, don't sit there and ask without wanting to hear the answer. Like if I ask you, do I have, am I stingy? And you say, "Oh," and I said, "Just say the truth." And you say, "Yeah, well, you are." Then I asked Sayyid Hashim, our lovely producer that does all the hard work, the one that we would be nothing here without, "Am I stingy?" And he says to me, "Yes, you are." Eventually, after speaking to someone, then I say, "All right, I've got to stop this trait I've got." Yeah. Do you know? It's the seventh thing that I have to address why I got rejected. A lot of people don't do that. Every single person they talk to, the same traits come in. And they're repeated and they're repeated and they're repeated. After I finish this discussion, I guarantee you, I'll get about 15, 20 people message me, "Were you talking about me?" This is what actually happens. And if you're going to message me about this, yes, I am talking about you. You're exactly that person. Because you're the one that doesn't listen to when we advise you about this. So that's the first thing, that I turn to God. Second thing, I rely on God. Third thing, that I'm content with God's decision. The fourth thing, that I research how a household should be, how I'm going to live before I enter the marriage. So why I'm telling you, if he or she is fitting to be a spouse, that person might be fitting to be someone you chill with. Yeah. They're not a spouse. Number 5, I lower my expectations. Number 6, I take heed to red flags. And number 7, I listen to the reasons as to why I was rejected. If the reason is, and this is beautiful, if they say, "Look, it's lovely if someone says this to you, you're too religious. I don't want someone that religious." You escaped. I dodged a bullet. You dodged a bullet if that's the reason why he or she rejects you.
Definitely. Ahsan, Sheikh, that brings our program to about a close now. Thank you for coming on. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Your responses are always very measured and thorough, and inshallah, this can perhaps help all those single people out there to inshallah get married as soon as possible. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep you in good health and accept all your amal, inshallah. To our viewers, thank you for joining us once again on another installment of our program. And we sincerely hope that you're able to benefit from these programs, these more interactive programs. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to cure all your sick, to have mercy on all your past deceased, and then hasten, of course, the reappearance of our 12th Imam Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan. That's all for now. Fi aman Allah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.